We are in chapter 2, to grow the brain, on page 26, leaving off where we were at the last recording. In the third paragraph, it says here, when an author submits an article for publication in a medical journal, it is first sent to peers in the author's field. They provide the critical eyes that ensure published articles are scientifically sound.
That's right.
Often reviewers tear into such papers with critical zeal. It's part of the process.
It is. Definitely.
In this case, however, the reviewers were uniform in their praise. Not one of the 3 neurology experts who reviewed the paper offered any major criticism.
That was good.
And they're talking about how also the brain size it can expand.
Oh, really?
But also the brain can expand. The brain, it says, with aging, but also expand with brain size even before shrinkage begins.
That's right.
It says here that
Absolutely right.
we can, of course, not only reverse the brain atrophy associated with aging, but also expand the brain size even before shrinkage begins.
That's right.
So it goes on to say, I'll get you started in chapter 3 on your own plan to grow your brain. But first,
That's good.
you need to know just how it's done. In short, brain growth occurs through 4 key avenues. The core 4 are adding synapses, bolstering highways, adding blood vessels, and aiding blood vessels, and neurogenesis. Adding synapses. We've long known that when you learn something new, you create new synapses. A process called synaptogenesis. Synapto.
You got it.
Synaptogenesis. Synapto. Like schnapps, but synaptogenesis. And that when you continue to use those synapses, you strengthen them. But it's only in recent years that we've come to understand how significant the impact of such brain training can be, and how quickly it can happen.
That's right.
In fact, as you'll read in chapter 7, repeated stimulation of synapses can lead to measurable structural changes in the brain in as little as several weeks. Examine the brain of a person learning to juggle or play golf, and you'll find the portions of the brain implicated for coordinated hand and eye movements. The cerebellum,
Right.
peripheral cortex, and frontal lobes are stronger and bigger than in someone who never juggled or played golf.
That's right.
This is in part due to synaptogenesis. Synaptogenesis.
Snap or smack?
Synapto.
Synaptogenesis.
Like synapse.
Okay.
Snap. SYNAPTO. I'm probably pronouncing it wrong, but I like the way synaptogenesis sounds.
Yeah, it sounds good.
The same principle applies to ballet dancers, basketball players, mathematicians, violinists, cab drivers, and anyone else practicing or learning a new skill. You need to learn a new skill, Mom.
I don't need to learn that.
Yes, you do, so you can grow your synapses and we can get some synaptogenesis working with you.
I don't need it.
Yes, you do. You need to do the synaptogenesis dance.
Okay, you got it.
Okay, the second core, there's 4 cores, and the second one is bolstering highways.
Right.
As you know, the
That's
brain,
more like it.
yeah, we're going to bolster the brain's highways. As you know, the brain's neighborhoods communicate with each other through networks of fiber bundles, which carry signals back and forth. When your hippocampus needs to communicate with your frontal lobe, for example, it sends a message via pathways.
Right.
How well they function depends on 2 things.
What?
How many synapses there are between the neurons that make up these fiber bundles,
That's right.
and how well myelination, myelinated those neurons are.
That's right.
Adding synapses helps strengthen the connections while preserving and nourishing a strong myelin coat on the axons through myelination helps to ensure messages zip speedily along.
Right.
The third one is adding blood vessels.
Oh, that's a good one.
The brain is a richly vascularized organ fed by intricate system of blood vessels that carry nutrients and oxygen to every cell. In fact, a third of the brain is made up of blood vessels, and a full 20% of the heart's output goes to the brain, despite the fact that the brain only accounts for about 2% of the body's body weight.
Right. Only 2%.
Only 2% of the person's body weight.
That's right.
The health and vibrancy of this network of blood vessels is critical to the brain's ability to thrive and grow. If the network is clogged or shrunken by blockages that slow or cut off the flow of blood, neurons can't thrive. This is why you need to do the bicycle.
That's right.
Go ahead, do the bicycle. Come on, do the bicycle. Good. Good. That's good for the brain. Some die, some merely fail to grow. But growing the brain isn't just a matter of keeping existing blood vessels in good health.
No.
It also relies on
Whoever said it was.
It also relies on actually increasing that network by pedaling the bike, by developing new blood vessel branches through angiogenesis. Angiogenesis we're talking about now. As you'll soon read, exercise has actually been shown to promote angiogenesis. Get pedaling, please. Which in turn brings more blood and oxygen to 100 billion cells in the brain.
Right.
Every time you pedal, you're bringing oxygen to 100 billion cells in the brain. Not million, billion.
Big.
Finally, out of the 4, we have neurogenesis.
Okay.
Now we're into the neurogenesis, the 4th part. The 4 core areas of improving one's brain. Neurogenesis. We've long known that neurogenesis occurs in the developing brain. But only in recent years has the field of neuroscience offered up conclusive evidence that the human brain is capable of growing new cells even in adulthood.
Oh, wow. That's good.
A concept that wasn't even taught to doctors in training during my medical school days in the 1990s.
Wow.
That's not to say the foundations of such discovery were unknown. In fact, as early as 1960, there was evidence that the adult brain is not fixed in size.
That's That's right.
that neurogenesis goes on well past childhood.
That's right.
It is seemingly outrageous. It was a seemingly outrageous notion at the time, and the scientific community largely dismissed it.
That's right.
That is until the late 1980s, when researchers conducting animal studies began to document the phenomenon in earnest.
True.
Before long, they had proven that neurogenesis was not only happening, it was also closely tied to learning.
Right.
In 1989, study of songbirds, for example, found that adult canaries grew new brain cells each year as they learned new songs in order to mate.
That's right.
Even so, as late as the early 1990s, there was still a lot of skepticism in the field of neuroscience.
That's right. Mm-hmm.
Enter Dr. Fred Gage, a professor in the laboratory of genetics at the Salk Institute for Biological Studies, who has studied neurogenesis extensively. For Gage and others, the 1990s would prove an opportune time to dispel the doubt,
That's right.
thanks to emerging tools that allowed them to stain, mark, and even count neurons in a way they never had before.
That's right.